Good morning, everyone. It's a joy to be with you today. I want to speak to you from the subject. God can do the impossible. Now, we've all faced situations where it seemed like there was no way out. Maybe you've been dealing with a health issue for years, and the doctors have said there's nothing more they can do. Or maybe your business is struggling, your family is falling apart, or your dreams feel too far gone. In the natural, it looks impossible. But I want to remind you today, we serve a supernatural God. When we talk about God specializing in the impossible, we're tapping into one of the most powerful and hope-filled truths in the Bible. Throughout Scripture, God continually reveals himself as the one who can do what no one else can. He doesn't operate on human logic, and he's not confined by the natural laws that limit us. What looks like a dead end to us is simply an opportunity for God to show his power. When we say something is impossible, we're often speaking from our limited human perspective. We see the bills that can't be paid, the illness that won't go away, the relationship that seems too broken to fix. But God sees it differently. He looks at our problems through the lens of his unlimited ability. He says in Jeremiah 32:27, "I am the Lord, the God of all mankind." Is anything too hard for me? The answer is always no. There is nothing too hard for God. Consider the story of Abraham and Sarah. They were promised a child, but they were well beyond childbearing years. From a human point of view, it was impossible. Yet Romans 4 tells us that Abraham didn't waver in unbelief. He believed that the God who promised was also able to perform it. And what happened? Isaac was born, just as God said. God waited until the situation was completely out of their hands, so he could make it clear that the miracle was from him. That's often how he works. He allows situations to go beyond human ability so we can learn to trust in his supernatural power. If everything in life could be solved with our effort, intelligence, or connections, we wouldn't need to rely on him. But God uses the impossible to stretch our faith, to reveal his glory, and to remind us that he alone is God. Another example is the story of the Israelites standing before the Red Sea. Behind them, Pharaoh's army was closing in fast. In front of them, the sea stretched out with no obvious escape. It looked like the end, but God wasn't finished. With one command, he parted the sea, and his people walked through on dry ground. That kind of miracle shows us that God doesn't need a way. He can create one. He's not trying to work within our limits. He's showing us that he has none. So when we face a Red Sea moment in our lives, it's not a time to panic. It's a time to remember that God specializes in impossibilities. Jesus himself demonstrated this over and over. He healed the sick, gave sight to the blind, raised the dead, and calmed storms with a word. He fed thousands with just a few loaves and fishes. He forgave sins and gave new life. All of these acts defied human explanation. But that's the point. They were never meant to make sense in the natural. They were signs of a God who is greater than our greatest problem. When the angel told Mary she would give birth to Jesus even though she was a virgin, she asked how it could be. The angel's answer was simple and profound. With God, nothing shall be impossible. That wasn't just a message for Mary. It's a truth that still applies today. Too often we limit what God can do in our lives because we think in terms of what we can do. We rely on our resources, our experience, our contacts. But God doesn't need any of those things. He can take 5 loaves and 2 fish and multiply them. He can take your lack and turn it into overflow. He can take your brokenness and turn it into something beautiful. The challenge for us is to believe, even when we don't understand. Faith is not about seeing the answer right away. It's about trusting the one who holds the answer. The impossible is not a wall, it's a doorway. It's a place where we stop trying to make things happen in our own strength and start trusting God to do what only he can do. So whatever looks impossible in your life today, whatever situation seems too far gone, too broken, too hopeless, don't give up. Don't let the natural facts make you forget the supernatural power of your God. He is still on the throne. He is still doing miracles. And he still specializes in making the impossible possible. Just because your circumstances look impossible doesn't mean that God's power is limited by them. We often fall into the trap of judging God's ability by what we see happening around us. If we don't see movement, we assume nothing is happening. If the door remains closed, we assume God isn't working. But the truth is, God is not bound by what binds. His power operates on a higher level, beyond what we can see, measure, or comprehend. He doesn't need favorable conditions to perform a miracle. In fact, he often does his best work in the middle of the storm, when everything around us seems to be falling apart. We all face times when it feels like the odds are stacked against us. Maybe you've been praying for a breakthrough for years, but your circumstances haven't changed. You're doing everything you know how to do, and yet the situation remains the same. The danger in moments like these is that we start to let our circumstances speak louder than God's promises. We begin to say, I guess it's not meant to be. Maybe God isn't going to come through this time. But God is not limited by the natural fact. He is not confined to the options you can see. He doesn't need things to line up in your favor to bring his plans to pass. All he needs is your faith. When the Israelites were wandering in the wilderness and had no food, God didn't send them into the nearest town. He made bread fall from the sky. When they had no water, he brought it out of a rock. These weren't just stories of survival. They were demonstrations of a God who is not limited by geography, resources, or logic. When Elijah was in a drought and had no food, God didn't send him to a wealthy village. He sent ravens to feed him. That's the kind of God we serve, a God who doesn't work within the system, but above it. Sometimes God allows our circumstances to look bleak, so that when the breakthrough comes, there's no doubt who deserves the credit. If everything worked out easily and smoothly, we might think it was because of our own strength, talent, or planning. But when you've done everything you can and things still seem stuck, that's often a setup for God to show his glory. That's where faith is forged. When you choose to believe not based on what you see, but on who you know God to be. Circumstances change, but God's power remains the same. His promises are not dependent on your situation being ideal. They're dependent on his word, which does not return void. We also need to remember that God often works behind the scenes in ways we cannot perceive. Just because you can't see anything changing doesn't mean nothing is happening. A seed planted in the ground looks lifeless for a time, but underneath the soil it's sprouting roots and preparing for growth. In the same way, God may be setting things in motion right now that you won't see until the time is right. That promotion, that healing, that restoration, it may already be in process. Don't let temporary circumstances convince you that God has forgotten you. He is faithful and he finishes what he starts. Peter learned this firsthand when he stepped out of the boat to walk on water. As long as he kept his eyes on Jesus, he did the impossible. But the moment he looked at the wind and the waves, his circumstances, he began to sink. That's a picture of how our focus determines our faith. When you fix your eyes on what's happening around you, fear grows. But when you fix your eyes on God, faith rises. Your circumstances might be screaming one thing, but God's word is still true. You are still favored. You are still covered. You are still on your way to your destiny. God's power is not limited by a bad report, a closed door, a shrinking bank account, or a broken relationship. He can turn things around in an instant. He can bring you from the back to the front, from overlooked to chosen, from stuck to free. So don't let what you see keep you from believing what he said. Stand on his promises, even when the circumstances don't match. That's where miracles happen, in the space between human limitation and divine. Trust that even now God is working beyond what you can see, and nothing in your life is too hard for him to change. Faith is the key that unlocks the power of God in our lives. It's not about having everything figured out or being perfect in our understanding. It's about trusting in a God who is greater than the circumstances we face. Faith activates the supernatural. It's the bridge between the natural and the divine. When we choose to believe, especially when things don't make sense, we open the door for God to move in ways that go beyond human comprehension. Faith is not passive, it's active. It means expecting something even when there's no evidence of it yet. It means speaking victory while you're still walking through a battle. There's a story in the Bible about a woman who had been suffering from a bleeding condition for 12 years. She had gone to every doctor, spent all her money, and still found no cure. In the natural, her situation was hopeless. But when she heard that Jesus was passing by, something in her stirred. She said to herself, "If I can just touch the hem of his garment, I will be healed." That statement was an act of faith. It wasn't based on what she saw or felt. It was based on what she believed about Jesus. When she touched him, power went out from him, and she was instantly healed. Jesus didn't say, "My power healed you." He said, "Your faith has made you whole." That shows us that faith is the connector. God's power is available, but it's our faith that draws it in. Too many people wait for everything to be just right before they start believing. They want to see the provision before they step out, the healing before they give thanks, the restoration before they declare it. But that's not how faith works. Faith believes first. Faith praises before the breakthrough. Faith acts while still waiting. And when we do that, when we trust God in the middle of uncertainty, it sets the stage for the supernatural. God is drawn to faith. Hebrews 11:6 says, without faith it is impossible to please God. That's because faith acknowledges that we are relying on Him, not ourselves. Sometimes people think they need to have big, perfect faith in order to see God move. But Jesus said that if we have faith the size of a mustard seed, we can move mountains. It's not about the size of our faith, it's about the object of our faith. Even small faith, when placed in a big God, can do amazing things. A little faith can open great doors. A little faith can shift a situation. The enemy tries to convince us that we're not spiritual enough, not strong enough, not faithful enough to see miracles. But the truth is, God honors even the smallest steps of belief. When you choose to believe instead of giving up, when you pray one more time instead of quitting, when you speak hope instead of doubt, that's faith. And that's powerful. Faith also requires perseverance. Sometimes the answer doesn't come right away, and it's easy to grow discouraged. But real faith holds on. It says, even if I don't see it yet, I know it's coming. Even if the door hasn't opened, I trust that God is still working. Faith is not about instant results, it's about consistent belief. When the Israelites marched around the walls of Jericho, nothing happened for 6 days. But they kept walking, kept believing, and on the seventh day, the walls came down. What if they had stopped on day 6? What if they had let frustration cancel their faith? Sometimes your miracle is just one step of obedience away, one prayer away, one act of faith away. When we walk by faith and not by sight, we begin to live on a different level. We stop being controlled by emotions and start being led by the Spirit. We stop reacting to the natural and start responding to the supernatural. Faith doesn't ignore the facts, but it chooses to believe that God is greater than the facts. The doctor's report may say one thing, but faith says, by His stripes I am healed. The bank account may be low, but faith says, my God shall supply all my needs. The situation may look dead, but faith says God can breathe life into dry bone. God is looking for people who will trust Him even when they can't trace Him, people who will believe when others doubt, people who will declare victory while still in the valley. That kind of faith moves heaven. That kind of faith brings the miraculous into the ordinary. And that kind of faith is available to you right now, no matter what you're facing. One of the most difficult parts of the faith journey is dealing with delay. We pray, we believe, we wait, and yet nothing seems to be changed. It can feel discouraging, even disheartening, especially when we're doing everything right, trusting God, staying in His Word, walking in obedience, and still the breakthrough hasn't come. In those moments, it's easy to start questioning whether God heard us or whether He's going to answer at all. But delay is not denial. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it won't happen. God's timing is not our timing, and what seems like a delay to us is often a part of His divine preparation. When God makes a promise, He intends to fulfill it. But there is often a waiting period between the promise and the fulfillment, and that waiting period is where our faith is developed. It's in the waiting that we learn to trust God more deeply, to lean into His presence, and to become the kind of person who can carry the blessing He's preparing. Think about Joseph in the Bible. God gave him dreams of leadership and influence, but for years he was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. If Joseph had judged God's faithfulness based on how long it was taking, he might have given up. But God wasn't denying Joseph's destiny, He was developing it. Every setback, every delay, every dark season was actually moving Joseph closer to what God had promised. It's the same for us. We may not see the big picture, but God does. He knows what lies ahead, and He knows what we need to be ready for it. Sometimes He delays an answer to protect us from something we're not prepared to handle. Other times, He uses the delay to strengthen our character, build our endurance, and deepen our dependence on Him. If God gave us everything we asked for immediately, we might not grow. But when we learn to trust Him in the wait, our faith matures and we become spiritually stronger. The story of Lazarus in John 11 is a powerful reminder of how God uses delay for a greater purpose. When Jesus heard that Lazarus was sick, He didn't rush to heal him. Instead, He waited several days. During that time, Lazarus died and it seemed like all hope was lost. But Jesus told His disciples, "This sickness will not end in death. It is for God's glory." When Jesus finally arrived, He raised Lazarus from the dead. The delay allowed a greater miracle to take place, not just a healing, but a resurrection. That's the kind of God we serve. He's not just trying to meet our expectations, He's trying to exceed them. Sometimes the delay is setting the stage for something far more powerful than we could have imagined. Another thing to remember is that during the delay, God is still working. He's lining up people, opening doors, and shifting circumstances in your favor, even if you can't see it. Just like a seed planted in the ground doesn't sprout overnight, the things God is doing in your life may be hidden beneath the surface for a time. But that doesn't mean nothing is happening. The roots are growing, the foundation is being laid, and when the time is right, the breakthrough will come. That's why Galatians 6:9 says, "Let us not grow weary in doing good, for in due season we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." It's tempting to get tired in the delay, to let frustration or doubt creep in. But giving up too soon can cost us the very thing God is about to deliver. The enemy will always try to convince us that the delay means denial. He'll whisper lies like, "God forgot about you," or "If it hasn't happened by now, it's never going to happen." But that's not true. God is faithful. He finishes what He starts. His word will not return void. When you feel like nothing is changing, remind yourself this delay has a purpose. God is not late, He's strategic. He knows exactly when the answer needs to come, and it will arrive right on time. So in the delay, keep trusting, keep praying, keep praising, keep believing. Don't let the waiting wear you down. Let it build you up. Because the delay is not a sign of God's absence, it's a sign of His perfect timing. What He promised, He will perform. It may not come when you want it, but it will come when you need it most. And when it does, you'll look back and see that every moment of waiting was worth it. The words we speak carry incredible power. They can either build up or tear down, bring life or invite defeat. Too often, when we're in the middle of a difficult situation, we start to speak words of doubt, fear, and frustration. We say things like, "It's never going to change," "I'll never get out of this," or "This is just my luck." And while those may feel like honest reactions, they are also declarations that shape our reality. What we say sets the direction of our life. If we continually speak defeat, we are unknowingly reinforcing the very thing we want to break free from. But when we begin to speak life, God's truth over our circumstances, we open the door for His power to move. The Bible says in Proverbs 18:21, "Death and life are in the power of the tongue." That means your words are not neutral. They are either moving you toward hope and healing, or toward discouragement and destruction. What you speak, you start to believe, and what you believe, you start to live out. If you constantly tell yourself that things will never improve, you begin to operate as if that's true. You lower your expectations, you shrink your vision, and you stop believing for more. But when you speak life, when you declare, "God is with me, this too shall pass, better days are ahead," you shift your mindset and align your heart with God's promises. God has given us His word not just to read, but to speak. When Jesus was tempted in the wilderness, He didn't remain silent. He didn't fight with emotions or opinions. He responded with scripture saying, "It is written." That's a model for us. When we face battles in our lives, we need to speak what God says, not what the situation looks like. If you're feeling weak, declare, "The Lord is my strength." If you're afraid, say, "God has not given me a spirit of fear." If you're in lack, proclaim, "My God shall supply all my needs." Speaking these truths doesn't deny your reality. It redefines it by bringing God into the center of it. It's especially important to speak life when nothing seems to be happening. That's when your words become seeds. Just like a farmer plants seeds and doesn't see results right away. Our words of faith may take time to bear fruit, but if we keep speaking life, we are watering those seeds with hope and expectation. Over time, things begin to shape. You may not notice it at first, but your spirit gets stronger. Your attitude changes and opportunities begin to open. There's a power that gets released when you speak in agreement with God, rather than in agreement with your fear or frustration. Sometimes we think we're being realistic by speaking negatively. But realism without faith often becomes pessimism. God never asked us to ignore our problems. He asks us to face them with confidence in His power. David didn't deny that Goliath was a giant. He simply declared that his God was bigger, and he spoke that confidence before the battle was won. That's what speaking life looks like. It's saying, "I may not see the answer yet, but I know it's coming." It's choosing words of victory in a situation that still looks like defeat. We also have to be mindful of the words we speak over others. When someone we love is struggling, our words can be a lifeline, or a way saying, "You'll never change," or "This is just how you are," can limit the people around us. But when we say, "I believe in you," or "God's not done with you yet," we help them rise above their circumstance. The same way we speak life over ourselves, we're called to speak it over our family, friends, and even those who have hurt us. Because words not only reflect our heart, they shape the hearts of others. If you want to change the direction of your life, start with your words. Don't let your mouth speak things your heart doesn't want. Declare healing, even if you feel sick. Declare peace, even in the storm. Declare abundance, even when you're in lack. You don't have to feel it to speak it. You have to believe. And that belief grows stronger every time you choose to speak life. The more you align your words with God's promises, the more you'll see those promises come alive in your reality. So let your words be faith-filled, hope-driven, and life-giving, because what you say today is shaping your tomorrow. God delights in doing things that go beyond human understanding. His nature is to take what looks broken, hopeless, or beyond repair, and breathe life into it. When we trust Him completely, even when there's no logical reason to, we give Him the space to move in supernatural ways. Trusting God means choosing to believe even when we can't see the outcome. It means putting our confidence not in circumstances, people, or plans, but in the One who created everything and holds it all together. This kind of trust is not casual or surface level. It's deep, unwavering, and anchored in the belief that God is who He says He is, and He will do what He says He will do. There are moments in life when everything seems to fall apart. Plans fail, relationships crumble, the diagnosis comes back bad, or the opportunity you were counting on slips away. In those moments, trusting God completely can feel like the hardest thing in the world. But it is precisely in those seasons of uncertainty that God proves Himself most faithful. He's not asking us to figure it all out. He's asking us to lean not on our own understanding, and to acknowledge Him in all our ways. When we do that, He promises to direct our path. Trust is what keeps us steady when the road is dark, when answers are delayed, when nothing makes sense. Trust is not a feeling, it's a decision. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stood in front of the fiery furnace with every reason to give in. The king had given them an ultimatum: bow to the idol or be thrown into the flames. But their response was powerful. They said that God was able to deliver them, but even if He didn't, they still wouldn't bow. That is the essence of complete trust. not just believing in God's power, but resting in His will. It's saying, I know God can, but I trust Him even if He doesn't do it the way I hoped. That kind of faith moves the heart of God. And as the story goes, they were thrown into the fire, but God joined them there. They came out without even the smell of smoke on them. Trusting God completely doesn't mean you won't face the fire. It means you won't be alone in it, and you'll come out strong. Sometimes we trust God when things are going well, but struggle when things get hard. True trust isn't conditional. It doesn't depend on how smooth the journey is. It stands firm, even when the winds. Trust is what allows you to say, God, I don't understand this season, but I know you're in control. It's waking up each day and choosing to believe that His plans are better than ours, even when it doesn't feel like. It's letting go of the need to have all the answers and resting in the truth that God's wisdom is far greater than ours. When we fully trust God, we also stop striving to make things happen in our own strength. That doesn't mean we become passive, but it means we stop forcing doors open or manipulating outcomes. Trust leads to peace. You can tell how much you trust God by how much peace you walk in. When you're filled with anxiety, it's often because you're trying to carry something you weren't meant to carry. God is asking you to release it into His hands, to believe that He's working behind the scenes and to know that His timing is always right. Trust brings rest, not because everything is perfect, but because you know the one who is perfect is handling it. Abraham trusted God enough to leave everything familiar and go to a land he had never seen. Later, he trusted God enough to offer his promised son Isaac on the altar, believing that even if God asked him to give up the very thing he waited years for, God could still make a way. That's the kind of trust God honors. It's not blind, it's rooted in relation. The more you walk with God, the more you learn to trust Him. You look back at your life and see all the times He carried you, all the doors He opened, all the ways He protected you, and it builds your faith. Trust grows when you remember His track record. Complete trust in God is not a one-time decision. It's a daily choice. It's declaring every morning, God, I trust you with this day, with this situation, with my life. It's letting go of control and saying, even if I don't get the answer I want, I believe you're still good, still faithful, and still working all things for my good. That kind of trust doesn't just invite miracles, it transforms your heart. It changes how you walk through life. Because when you know God is in control, you don't have to fear what's ahead. You just keep walking, keep believing, and keep trusting that what He has planned is always greater than what you left behind.